Hello everyone, welcome to my video. Today we'll talk about mapping frameworks in Java. Now, we all use mapping frameworks, don't we? Mapstruct, Model Mapper, JMapper, and many others. There are a lot of mapping frameworks in Java. But the real question here is, do we really need them? Do we really need them after all? Because often we just need to do simple mapping. You might be surprised that most of the time we don't need them. We could easily create a utility function that maps one object to another object, so we won't need to add this library to the dependencies, and our project will be smaller, the bundle size of course. It's a win-win. So before adding these libraries, maybe it's better to take some time and understand if this is really necessary, if we really have to add this library. Or maybe we could achieve the same result by adding a function, for example, our custom function. That's why we have a project here that I prepared to demonstrate a use case. This happens more often than we know. So, this is a standard application. We have controllers, entities, models, repository, and services. So, here in the entities we have the company entity, which has several properties, including the ID, name, description, address, and city. Now we have a controller here, company controller, with a method, findById, which returns a company DTO. Let's take a look at the service now. Here, in this project, we are using Model Mapper, which is one of the mapping frameworks in Java. I think the code speaks by itself. It's quite easy to understand what is going on here. We are just finding a company by its ID, and if we don't find it, we are throwing an exception here. Then we map the company, the entity, to a DTO. Why are we doing this? Because we don't want to expose all our company's properties to the user. Our entity has several properties here, and we don't want to expose all of them to the user, because if you can see here, the company DTO has only two properties. We just want to expose the name and the description. We don't want to expose the address, the city, or the ID. Just two. That's why we are returning the company DTO. And this is a perfect example, actually it's a quite common example, to use a mapping framework. In this case, we are using Model Mapper, which is one of the mapping frameworks available in Java. Now, how does it work? Actually, Model Mapper is smart because it will match the properties by their names. So, in this case, we have company, name and description, and company DTO, name and description. It will match them, it will create an object first of all, and then it will fill the properties and we will return the object. Then after we get the object, we return it to the controller. So this is quite an easy example, but it's perfect because this happens more than you might think. But if you think about it, we could get rid of Model Mapper. After all, we could create our own function that maps an entity to a DTO. So let's do this. Let's try. First of all, let's go to the company DTO here, and let's create a constructor. Public company DTO here, and then public company DTO. This time with string name, string description, then name, and then description. Oops. That's perfect. Now let's create our own function here. Public company DTO map entity to DTO company here. Return new company DTO company get name company get description. Perfect. And now we can just call our new function here, company, and get rid of model mapper. Perfect. Now we just remove the mapping framework from this example. Of course, this was an easy example, and it was easy to remove the framework. But there are many other examples in which this applies. Now it was the company with few properties. It could be another entity with more properties. It doesn't matter. Even there, we can create our own function and map the entity to the final object. It will be even faster. Anyway, there's still something wrong in our application. The main problem here is that we are returning a whole entity just for two properties. We could easily return just one object containing the two properties. So if we do that, we can get rid of this function here, and our SQL will be better. It will be faster, because then we won't be returning anymore all the properties that we don't need. So let's make this change. Let's go to the company repository here. Actually, first we'll go to the company DTO. We'll change the company DTO to a record, because now we want the object to be immutable, just a record. Then here, of course, we need the syntax, string name, string description, and we can get rid of all of this. Much better. Let's go to the company repository now. Let's create a new method, public optional company DTO find DTO by ID, integer ID. Okay, so let's see import optional, let's see import company DTO, and here let's create the query. First let's import here. Okay, so the query, select new, then the package, in this case Lorenzo Miscoli, mapping, then what do we have, models, and then company DTO, then CNAME, C description from company C, where CID equals to my ID. That's perfect. Now in the service we remove this, and we'll just change this to this. And we can return the object. We can remove the function from here. Let's remove the import, and now it's perfect. Now we are not using any mapping framework. We don't even have our own function to map the entity to the DTO. We just did it in our repository. We mapped from our entity to our DTO, in this case it's a record, our object that we want, so the properties. It's even better. It's the best way to return only some properties of the entity, because after all we don't need the whole entity, we just need some properties, and we don't need a mapper if we just map the object that we want in our query. It's much better. So at this point we need to try if our application is working or not. So let's run it. Let's go to app here and let's run it. So now it's starting, and it started. Let's check first the company controller. The URL is companies followed by the ID. So let's go to the browser here. Let's type HP followed by localhost 8080 and companies, and then 1. As you can see, it is working. Now probably you're wondering, how is this working? Like, where are we getting the data? Now, let me tell you that we are getting the data thanks to Flyway, because we set up Flyway. In fact, here in the DB migration, we've got a migration file, and we have company, we're creating the company table, and we are inserting a row. Just for example, just to demonstrate if the application is working or not. So now, to recap, are mapping frameworks useful? Yes, they are. They can really come in handy. For example, Model Mapper that can match properties by name. It's really easy to set up, and it can ease a lot of problems, especially if you don't want to create a lot of functions to map one object to another object. But the best solution actually is to rely on the queries, because first of all, when we were using Model Mapper, we were returning a whole entity just for two properties, which is wrong. It is wrong, so you have to return only an object that contains the properties that you want. There's no point in returning the whole entity. So in this case, it's much better to just return the object in the query using Spring. It's way better. Plus, you're using a record which is immutable, and this is what we want. There might be cases where you want to use mapping framework, and in the cases it's perfectly fine to use them, but in this specific case, no, you don't have to use, and most of the time you don't have. You'll find yourself always mapping one object to another object because you are returning an entity, you want to map into another one. So in all these cases, just you return the DTO from the query, or create your own function, which is way faster than any other mapper. So guys, that's all for today. If you enjoyed the content, like the video, subscribe. Thanks for watching. I see you next time. Bye!